If the New York Mets try to cash in on top shortstop prospect Ronny Mauricio this offseason in a trade, who should they target? Find out on today's episode of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now, on today's show, I was joined by Jordan Grossman for one of our farm reports as we discuss what a Ronny Mauricio trade could look like this offseason. He is the one top prospect that Jordan and I would be comfortable trading. We've gone through all of these guys through our farm reports during the offseason, even dating back to the regular season. So if the Mets decide to make a trade, this would be the prospect that could be moved. We go through that in the first segment. Then in the second and third segments, we dive into some potential trade targets the Mets could look at if they wanted to cash in on this prospect's value right now. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. Here's my conversation with Jordan Grossman about trading Ronny Mauricio. All right, so we are back with Jordan Grossman for our last farm report of the new year. This is not going to go up on Friday because we got a New Year's special coming out on Friday, but today I have Jordan on who does social media for us and does these Friday farm reports with me, usually as we go through the Mets system. And what we're going to talk about today is Ronny Mauricio, because this is a prospect we've discussed in the past. And I think when we're going through the Mets farm system, if they were to make a trade this offseason, do you agree, Jordan, that Ronny Mauricio might be the piece that makes the most sense to trade because of his value and because of the fact that you have Lindor on the roster, as opposed to trading a Beatty or a Vientos or, of course, Alvarez, who I think both of us agree is not getting traded ever?
Yeah, I mean, I've referenced it a couple of times in the podcast that I think pretty clearly Alvarez and Beatty are the top two prospects in the system right now. And you could honestly make a case for Allen being number three despite the Tommy John surgery, just because his raw stuff is so impressive. But yeah, Mauricio, super high ceiling. Like you said, Lindor's in place, so he's kind of blocked there, even though I think Mauricio is probably going to end up a third baseman long term due to his size. But got really, really good power. Teams are going to love that. And you know he can move for a guy his size. You know, despite me saying he's going to end up at third, he still moves pretty well. But it's all going to depend on how teams view his approach at the plate, because that's the biggest issue. So, but yeah, like you said, I think he's definitely the guy who's most likely to be moved this offseason.
Yeah, and what we're going to do today is kind of similar to a couple weeks ago where we were talking about, free agents, and we both kind of pitched each other's ideas. We don't know what each other has in mind. We're going to do one trade for a position player, one trade for a pitcher, including Ronny Mauricio as the headliner in these deals. But I do want to talk about why this could be a smart time to move Mauricio as well, because if we compare Ronny Mauricio to Ahmed Rosario, if you had rewinded the clock to, I guess, what he debuted in 2018. So let's say 2017, 2016. If you were to trade Ahmed Rosario then, imagine what you could have gotten. Instead, he is essentially the fourth piece in the Lindor trade. I mean, Jimenez probably had more trade value at the time, more control coming off a great season. And Isaiah Green, a recent draft pick, Wolf, a recent draft pick. So I think that if you just look at that, sometimes it makes sense to trade some of these prospects when they're still blue. It's almost like driving a new car off the lot, right? As soon as you drive it off the lot, that value diminishes significantly. So maybe sometimes it is smart to, even if you want to preserve your prospects, cash in on some of them when they have max value.
Yeah, I mean, it really just depends on a team's philosophy. I'm just gonna say this. All these trade ideas for me, they're always a lot of fun. I love talking about that kind of stuff. But just based off the comments that I've seen Billy Epler make this offseason, I don't really see a huge trade coming this offseason. I think they're fully focused on just using pure cash to bring in new acquisitions. But like I said before, if they do make a trade, I think Mauricio is definitely the one that's most likely, just because, like you said, he can bring back a ton of value, and he's not really of your top three guys, you could say. And but if we're comparing Rosario and Mauricio, I think um, like Rosario, like the OBP wasn't even that bad in the minor leagues, and Mauricio's is way worse. So I don't know, that's going to be like a big uh, thing for teams, is like I said before, who views him like what can he be long term with can he be will he be a 300 OBP guy like Javi Baez, or can he be a guy who eventually works his way to maybe the 330 340 range?
Well, that actually is interesting that you bring that up. How would you compare the differences there to what Amed Rosario was? I mean, at one point, was Rosario not even like a top two prospect with Baseball America at one point? I mean, he was really high. So what are the differences in the two of them in their prospect statuses, where Rosario was at one point and where Mauricio is now?
So Mauricio has, I think, all the talent in the world. He has just as much, if not more, than Rosario did. But the thing is, Rosario was showing more results in the minor leagues when you could see it in his numbers, whereas Mauricio is just all upside at this point, because you see when you look at the raw numbers for Mauricio, it's like low OBP, low batting average. And really the only thing that pops out is the slugging percentage and the home runs. Whereas Rosario, he was hitting for high average, he was getting on base a decent amount, and he was stealing bases. So and yeah, you just said it. Like, he was a top three prospect for Baseball America. I think after a few graduations, he even might have been number one prospect for MLB Pipeline for a couple of weeks after Gleyber Torres graduated, and maybe I think someone from the Whites, Yohan Moncada. Yeah, after he graduated as well, I think he might have been number one for a few weeks before he came up. So yeah, he was like Mauricio. I think right now he's maybe a probably top 20, top 30 guy on most lists, whereas Rosario was top three because of the results he was showing in the minors.
Yeah, it really is an interesting comparison, and it just again kind of leads to my point where we thought that Rosario was can't miss. And look, he's turned himself into a quality major leaguer. He had a good second half with the Guardians. It's not, we're not rooting for him, but he's not what we expected he was going to be. And so sometimes, to the best thing for your farm system could be to move some of these guys, because maybe you get that pitcher and then you don't have to trade other guys to eventually come back and end up depleting your farm system more down the line to make other trades happen. And I think, before we get into this exercise, the one thing I'll say is, even if these trades don't happen now, I'd imagine that you're probably looking at people with controls like I did a little bit. So this could also be a situation where these are trades that could eventually happen at the deadline as well. That Mauricio would potentially be that main chip that you would use once you got to the deadline if you had to put your team over the top.
Exactly, and it's, the Mets have the 11th and 14th pick in the upcoming draft. It's going to be either, I'm not sure the exact date, if it's back in June or maybe if they've just updated it to July. But by coming around the trade deadline point, they'll have two new top prospects in the system. Hopefully, if they can get them signed, so that should make Mauricio definitely a little bit more expendable if he ends up staying with the team through the winter.
And when you say if they can get them signed, is it has a whole new meaning now, doesn't it?
Absolutely, you hope you don't have another Kumar Rocker situation, but you never know.
Yep, we never know. We'll see what happens. So in just a minute, we will get into those trade packages. This holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar or even better than a candy bar. And that is Built Bar, which is filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, but covered in chocolate. It's amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat while being high in protein. So you get the best of both worlds, delicious and healthy. There's so many delicious flavors to choose from, whether it's raspberry, mint brownie, cherry, double chocolate, my personal favorite, cookies and cream, peanut butter brownie. If you're having a hard time choosing, you can get a mixed box where you'll get two of each. You can see which ones you like best and then order your favorites moving forward. And if you want to get that extra fuel to get you through the day, you have to get Built Bars, or at least try the Built Bar Puffs, which are light, fluffy, marshmallowy through and through. There's all different kinds of flavors, all come covered in chocolate. They taste great, and you will not believe that they're still filled with all that good protein you need. So if you want to try Built Bar today, go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15. You're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, so now let's talk about these trades. I will let you go first because you're the guest. So I'll let you take this however you want to. what's the trade package you're most excited about to potentially send Ronny Mauricio out?
So for me, the one guy that I've had an eye on for a couple of years, and it's a team that's expected to be a seller this offseason after lockout. It's a pitcher from the Cincinnati Reds, Luis Castillo. I think he's a name that really pops out to me. I know some people they'll look, right at the top and they'll see the 3.98 ERA and be like, "Why are you looking at this guy? He's not that great." But if you take a closer look, you'll see he had like a bit of a really rough start through his first 6 7 weeks of the season. Had a 7.61 ERA in his first 10 starts, but then he found himself and he really finished strong. Had a 2.76 ERA over his last 23 starts. He's extremely durable. He made 30 plus starts from 2018 to 2019 and in 2021. And then the shortened season, he made 12 starts over a 60 game period. So he basically pitched as many games as he could. And another reason for I think the poor ERA was also because he had a really bad Reds defense behind him. If you look at outs above average, the Reds had the second worst defense in baseball last year,
Who was
only
playing
behind the
right
Boston.
field?
Nick Castellanos, man, not fun to watch. And then you also have they have Eugenio Suarez playing a good amount of shortstop, so that definitely didn't help either. Um, yeah, Reds were the second worst defense in baseball last year by outs above average, only behind the Reds. The Red Sox were the only team that was worse. And when Castillo was pitching, he had a -5 outs above average behind him, which
Wow.
is a really bad mark. So getting a good defense behind him, having someone like Francisco Lindor as the anchor of your defense, and then I know Javi Baez isn't going to be here, but you assume the Mets defense is still going to be pretty solid. Pete Alonso's made some improvements, like we've talked about before. So I trust that they can do that, and he's so the defense is a big emphasis because he is one of the best ground ball pitchers in baseball. Since 2019, he has the highest ground ball percentage in the sport at 56.3%. Higher than guys like Marcus Stroman, Kyle Hendricks, Dallas Keuchel, all those names. So yeah, he really needs a strong defense behind him, and it's not like he's a Marcus Stroman type where it's just going to be ground balls. He also induces a ton of strikeouts. He's 11th in K percentage among all qualified starters since 2019. 10.4 FWAR since 2019, 10th among all MLB qualified starters. He has pitched in the 7th inning in 30% of his career starts, which is a pretty high mark. So I think if the Mets are all in on this 2 to 3 year period, it seems like they handed Scherzer the 2 year deal, Canna 2 years. DeGrom's got a year or two left on his deal, so it seems like they're really going in a 2 3 year period. I think getting Castillo for his age 29 to 30 seasons is really smart, and the pieces I expect them to send back would have to be obviously like we're talking about Mauricio, and then you also send JT Jin, right-hander pitcher Jose Buto, who's pitching in Double A, and then you throw in. Hopefully, you can get them to bite on JD Davis as well.
I love any trade that includes JD Davis. You hear me just
I,
get
I knew you
excited
would.
audibly. I was just like, oh, we get rid of JD too in the deal. Yeah, I mean, look, I yesterday talked about German Marquez on the podcast. I looked at Marquez and Castillo, very similar timelines. You said Castillo has 2 years left, right?
Yeah, 2 years left in his deal.
Yeah, I think Marquez is 3, but these are pitchers that I think are better than the ERA would suggest, as you illustrated
Exactly.
there. And I do also, maybe after the show, got to find out where you get the outs above average when the pitcher's on the mound. That's a stat that I
Oh
know.
yeah, I got to show you that. It's a thing Michael Mayer showed me. It's a very cool part of baseball savant.
All right, definitely got to check that out. But yeah, so I definitely am intrigued by that package. I think if the Mets were to trade Mauricio this offseason, I believe it would be for pitching. And because I don't see, I really don't see the Chapman or Jose Ramirez trade happening. Who knows? But I don't think that those are necessarily likely. And I think that the one thing the Mets could look to do is add that pitcher. And if you look at free agency right now, if they don't want Rodon, I mean, I don't know who else they would go for that would have the upside of a Castillo. So that's definitely a really interesting trade. I'm gonna go hitter first because I don't have a backup plan. So I was sitting here just hoping you wouldn't take my hitter because then I had to scramble. So I'm going to go with the Ketel Marte as the trade target. Now this is going to be a hefty package. I think that's where me and you might have to join heads on this one to figure out what it would take to get him. But if you're talking about what Billy Epler likes, he's mentioned many times he likes players that play on the dirt and the grass. Marte obviously does that second base, center field, gives you even more versatility, more speed. I mean, if they could get him, he's under contract for I think 3 more years under a good deal. So he's got $8 million this year, and then it looks like two options: a club option for 10 million, and then another one for 12 million. So 3 years of control on a player that is, a five tool type guy. First off, let me just ask you, what do you think about Marte as a trade target in general?
Honestly, I'm kind of upset that I didn't think about him just because I was looking when you told me about this exercise, I was looking at bad teams that were expected to be sellers this offseason, like the Athletics, like the Reds, like the Rockies, and the Diamondbacks just completely slipped my mind. I forgot how bad they were last year. And Marte would really be a perfect pickup for the team. Like you said, he can play center field. Obviously, you have Starling Marte, but Marte can easily go to a corner. He's done it in the past. He is 33 years old, so he's probably going to need like a little time in the corners just to go easy on his body. He has missed time in the past. Can play second base right next to Lindor. He's strong there. I'm sure if you put him at third, he could play that in a pinch as well. So really versatile guy. I think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and suddenly, I mean, what I think that trade would do for you is it would basically push Robinson Cano out of the lineup and onto the bench, and you would be able to cycle that DH around, whether that's Pete getting a day, Canna getting a day, Marte, Nemo, however you want to do it. Jeff McNeil and Marte would be able to slide all over the place. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the type of team Billy Upper likes to build. I just don't know. I don't know if the Mets had the pack. I think the package would get to the point where you'd have to give up two of your top guys probably to get Marte,
Yeah, I was just
and
gonna
that
say that.
and I
Yeah.
think that that's where this doesn't happen simply because I don't think the Mets are willing to go that far this offseason. And it goes away from the plan that you talked about and that Epler has laid out with the free agent signings on short-term deals.
Yeah, like you said, I think it's gonna have to end up if you want a guy as good as Marte, it's gonna have to be Mauricio and Beatty or Mauricio and an Allen. It's not, obviously you want to stay away from Alvarez is like, that guy is as untouchable as it gets in the system. But yeah, it's gonna have to be Mauricio and then another top four, top five guy.
And maybe because that is the case, maybe that is a trade that would make more sense at the deadline. Let's just say the Mets season is going well, but Jeff McNeil struggling at second base. The Diamondbacks are having a bad year, and you get to that point where you decide, you know what, this Mets team is so close. You want that one last piece to put you over the top, and then you would still have them under control. So maybe that would be also another thing that you could sell yourself on. That hey, we can give up a Mauricio and a Beatty if we had to get this guy in now to win now, but we can keep him a little bit long term. BetOnline has you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. The football season continues to march towards the playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using the promo code Locked On. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. So let's now move on though to your position player trade package. Who did you identify here?
So I'm gonna be upfront. I cheated a little bit. This is a two-player deal. It's a pitcher and a hitter.
All right, that's
Um,
fine.
so we're gonna do. You mentioned the name before. You said you probably don't think it's gonna happen, but I'm going with the Athletics. I'm going to pick up that third baseman Matt Chapman,
Okay.
along with right-handed pitcher who made the All-Star team this year, Chris Bassett. I'm
My
sent. I'm
gut reaction though is again, I think that it could happen, but it's going to be just like that deal I just talked about with Marte, where we're going to have to see a lot of Mets prospects going out to get it done. So what do you think it would take to get him?
Yeah. So I'll give you my trade package. It's probably not that accurate. It's probably going to take more, but I have them sending Ronny Mauricio, JT Ginn, Tyler McGill, and Jalen Palmer. And you probably have to add another lottery type guy, like Alex Ramirez or a guy like they just signed Juan Samuel. I think that's his name. It's $2 million. But yeah, it's gonna have to be another lottery type guy, Dominguez maybe, that you're gonna have to add because, like you said, Chapman 2 years left in the deal. Bassett just had an All Star year, but he is 33 and he's only got 1 year left in the deal, so I don't think he's gonna cost a ton. And also, we all know John Fisher is a cheap scumbag who just wants to shave payroll down to the bone. All teams are aware of that. They want to get rid of. They're going to trade one of Olsen or Chapman. That's something that I feel very confident about before opening day. So I'm hopeful that it's Chapman. Chapman, the best way I can describe him, for Mets fans, I feel like, is that he is a slightly better offensive version of Michael Conforto, where he's a little bit inconsistent at times with the batting average. A lot of people feel like they can be in the 280, 300 range, mostly get stuck in the 250, 260 range, but can get on base, hits for a good amount of power. But then obviously the difference between Chapman and Conforto is on the defense. This is the best defensive third baseman in baseball. Um, and him and Lindor would just be phenomenal. I think it would be the best, left-sided infield since Trevor Story and Nolan Arenado, and maybe one of the best of the last decade. It'd be hard for a lot of ground balls to get past one of those guys.
I think it'd even be better, honestly. I mean, I think Chapman has proven to be as good as Arenado, and I think Lindor is better than Story. That is, yeah, and I will say that when I said before about the Chapman and Ramirez not happening, Ramirez is more the one that seems like it's not happening. I think Chapman, like you said, there's definitely motivation from the Athletics to move either Olson or Chapman, or like you said, I mean, the guy's cheap. He could just want to scrap it all, and I mean, he's got a new manager in there. I know that. Or they're going to have a new manager in there, I should say. But maybe they want to go into more of a rebuild. Bassett, the 1 year of control, so that makes sense as well. You didn't talk about him too much. I mean, what do you think he would bring to the Mets rotation? I mean, clearly, I would assume number 3 over Carrasco, and maybe also a little more of a sure thing than Carrasco or Taiwan Walker heading into next season.
Yeah, so I don't like. I think Luis Castillo is a very strong number 3 behind Scherzer and Degrom. I think in most rotations he's probably a number 2 or even could be a number 1 in some rotations. But with Bassett, I just want to read off his ranks for. It wasn't just last year. Since the start of 2018, these are his ranks for all AL starters with a minimum of 400 inning pitched. His 3.23 ERA is third. His 3.82 FIP is ninth. The
Wow.
1.14 WHIP is fifth, and then his 8.7 K per nine is 14th, which is obviously a little bit lower. But I think you take the little bit of lower strikeouts with all those other numbers. He's a strong starter. Like I said, he's 33 and he only has a year left, so it's not going to cost a ton. But he's not going to come for free either because he is a good starting pitcher. Would be a strong number 3 in that rotation. Could bump Carrasco down to that number 4 spot. You wouldn't have to feel as reliant on him coming off a bit of a year where he struggled with the hamstring injuries, the first inning problems. So yeah, I think it would be a really smart deal for the Mets to try to get someone like him. Even if it's just Bassett, you don't have to give Mauricio. I think Bassett's a guy that should definitely be targeting, or Sean Manaea or Frankie Montas, any one of those guys in the Athletics rotation.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, that could also be a trade that doesn't require as much if you're just getting a pitcher with 1 year left. Is Mineo 1 year also? I believe.
I think he's 1 year. Yeah,
I think Frankie Montes is 2 years. Because I
he's. I,
was.
th- I think he's 3 actually.
Oh wow, okay, yeah. Because I was looking at
Yeah,
him as a potential option
he
for
would
my
probably
pitcher
cost the
here.
most out of all 3 of those guys.
Yeah, yeah. So look, the A's are going to be sellers. It seems like so. That is a team that you could see the Mets do business with if they decide to go down the trade market. All right, I got to make my last decision here. I'm going to pitch a 1-for-1 trade for you. Ronny Mauricio gets you a player to put on your team, and I want to put on my Brody Van Wagenen hat.
Oh no.
If I call up the Brewers and I say Ronny Mauricio for Josh Hader, I mean, do you think that opens a dialogue? Because Josh Hader has 2 years left. He's going to get expensive for them. I know you don't like to trade top prospects for relievers. I'm being hypocritical because I've bashed Brody for all these years about the Diaz trade, but that's a closer that would put the Mets over the top. An arm that would be, I mean, just lights out for the Mets. If you only had to give up Ryan Mauricio, one, would you do that deal? And two, would the Brewers do that deal?
I think both teams say no. I don't think either team is interested in that deal. Just because. It's like you said. I've been extremely against since before the Diaz trade. I've always been extremely against trading top prospects for relievers and just trading for top relievers in general. I don't think it makes sense. I think when you can find guys who are on the market for so cheap, like you find a guy like Aaron Loop, you could find a guy like Addison Reed. We've seen Mets relievers in the past you can find for bargain deals, and they end up being terrific. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I understand why you propose it. Just want to get kind of wild out here. It's definitely a fun trade proposal, but I don't really see either team being all that interested because I think the Brewers could get someone they like more than Mauricio for Josh Hader if they really put him on the market.
So that would be the thing for me is a lot of times with these relievers, what happens is you get yourself to a point where you're in the season, your bullpen is not where you want it to be, and then you have to really overpay. So maybe right now, if you call up the Brewers about Mauricio, there's a chance that that could be a conversation that can open up where who knows if the Brewers are shopping Hader at the deadline and you need a closer, like the price could be even greater then than it is now. So that's the only reason why I threw it out there. I know it's not a trade that will happen, but it is one that's interesting to me because if you could get Josh Hader, I just look at a picture that, I mean, his numbers are just ridiculous. 1.23 ERA, 102 strikeouts, 50 and two-thirds innings pitched, 15.6 strikeout per nine this year, but for his career, 15.4. I mean, he comes in, he strikes out two batters an inning. That's basically what it is. It's insane. And so I know it's not going to happen, but I'm just imagining what that Mets bullpen could be like if suddenly it's Josh Hader, Edwin Diaz, Trevor May. And that's the type of bullpen you need if you're really going all in. And again, part of this also reflects my opinions on Ronny Mauricio. That I feel like if you could get a deal like that done right now and cash in on him before he turns into a pumpkin when he gets to the big leagues, I think it could be worth it.
Listen, it definitely makes some sense, and especially with all the David Stearns rumors, maybe you call up the Brewers, be like, hey, we'll overpay for Josh Hader a little bit. Maybe we'll throw in more than Mauricio, as long as you promise to leave your contract in Milwaukee and come join us and be the president of baseball ops next year.
It's like a party gift that he can give to the Brewers. Hey, I got you Ryan Mauricio and Khalil Lee for Josh Hader. I mean, and they still got Devin
Ex-
Williams, so they're fine. They don't need
Exactly.
him.
It's the Brewers. They can exactly, and they can find random guys out of nowhere who can turn to the next Josh Hare or the next Devin Williams. They have no problems with their pitching. Look what they've done with Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff and Freddie Peralta and all those guys. They have a terrific pitching staff. I don't think Josh Hare is going to change the outlook of that team too much. It's really their offense that they need help with.
And then what's going to happen is the Mets are going to trade for him. Josh Hader's going to have a 4 ERA through July, and everyone's going to be in my mentions like, why did you want this? But hey, this is we're still in 2021. We're in a lockout. It's time to have some fun. So throw out a Ronny Mauricio, Josh Hader trade because it's fun to talk about. But anyway, I think the bottom line that we come out of this podcast with is the Mets most likely are going to look to add through free agency throughout this offseason. But if you're a Mets fan, get around the idea that if they're going to make a big trade at some point over the next year, I think Ronny Mauricio is the prospect that you would most want to see moved, as opposed to some of these other guys that I think are a little more sure things.
Yeah, definitely. It's I've talked about it before. I'm a big, huge Mark Vientos fan, and I think I'm getting every day closer and closer to the point where I want to hold Vientos over Mauricio, just because I think the raw power that Vientos holds is just as good, if not better, than Mauricio, and also he can get on base at a much better percentage. And I'll take the drop off in defense for a guy who can really prove it on offense, which is something the Mets need right now.
Well, I think the biggest thing with Vientos, and I've talked about him on the show a lot. We've talked about him, and I had a podcast on him recently. The thing about it is if you're trying to win now, he's the one prospect that can help you win in 2022. I don't think any of these other top prospects you have, it's outside of Beatty with just an incredible season. I mean, Vientos is the one that you could see in June as a big part of this Mets team.
Exactly. Like I think even if Mauricio just tears up Double A next year, I think they're going to be very cautious with him, and they're not going to bring him up until at least 2023. He's not really a guy that you're going to think about as next year as an option for third base or wherever you want to put him.
You think he starts the year in high A still probably?
No, because I think he spent the last 2 weeks of the season in
Oh,
Double
did
A.
he?
So
Did he go to Double A?
yeah,
Okay.
they had a big COVID outbreak, so he got promoted probably a little
Right,
bit too
right.
quickly. But he actually, he held his own. So I think Double A is definitely going to be where he starts 2022.
I just keep him there the whole year, let him pad those numbers, and continue to improve as a prospect, as a trade piece. All right. Well, thank you as always, Jordan, for joining us. You can find him on Twitter at MetsFansSince02. Follow his Facebook page at We Are Mets Believers, and he does social work with us at Locked On Mets. That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. We will not have a show for you tomorrow, but on Friday, I will be back for the last show of the year as we will look ahead towards 2022 on New Year's Eve to the things you should be most looking forward to next year. As always, though, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Locked On Bets is the place to go for all your daily gambling needs. You can follow Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.